Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 397. Today we're going to talk about Tesla versus Edison, War of Currents. And now what this game is about is each player is an investor that's going to partner with some different inventors. We've got Tesla and Edison and some other different inventors here. And so what you're doing is you're partnering with them and trying to develop technologies, invest in different companies, not necessarily just your own, other players as well, and then fulfill contracts and bids throughout the United States to get different technologies up and running. So it's during the time when the AC versus the DC current was big, and so we're trying to develop and sort of set up the initial phase of the power grid or the electric grid of the United States. So let's jump into the mechanics. It's kind of a stock game more than anything else, but it does have a lot of different elements above and beyond that. So it's a very different kind of stock game. So let's jump in and see how it works, and then I'll tell you what I think of it. Okay, so we can see most of the components that you get in the game here. Here you've got the main player board, and the top half of the board is a map, and these represent different cities that players will go and try to get contracts in. And if you can see, the map actually has these gray lines. They're a little bit hard to distinguish, but you don't really want them showing too much. And then what these do is they divide up the board based on player count. So if you're playing just a two-player game, all the cities here northeast of where my hand and where this line is going to be for the two-player game. And then you're going to add in this section here, you can kind of see that gray line there for 3 players and 4 up to 5 players. Now the bottom half of the board here has a couple of different tracks. Now each player has their own company. You can buy stocks in your own company as well as other players' companies, and this marker is going to track the value of your company. So as it goes up and up and up, you can see it's going to have different payouts along the bottom here. So this one will pay out $20 at the, or $20,000, excuse me, at the end of different rounds. And then you've also got here a turn track, and you can see you've got phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and then sort of in between those you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds there. So the phases will trigger different auctions, and then you have 2 action rounds in between each auction, and depending on which phase you're in is actually going to sort of augment some of the different character abilities as well. Then you've got a fame track, which is sort of a glorified turn order track, but you also will be awarded some bonuses for being high up on the fame track. And then you've got the fame track in terms of the AC versus DC. So if you look here, there's very much a battle between AC versus DC, and you can see as this kind of moves up here, it's more in favor of AC. Different actions in the game will drive your stock up, DC will drive it down, and then as you go the other direction and so forth. So as you have multiple players kind of investing, you can see the different tracks here in different types of technology. They're going to be sort of driving propaganda up and down against or for either of those different technologies. And then here we've got 3 different tracks. We've got an AC and a DC track, and as you move up you will get better at different technologies, and you'll be able to fulfill better contracts and projects that are out here in the different cities, and you need to drive up a higher level there. You always will need to drive up this bulb track here. So if a contract or a city, you can see here Washington DC is a 3, you need to have 3 in bulb, 1, 2, 3. Now you can see the cities have different contract values. We've got 1, 3, 4, 3, 4, and so on, and that's the amount of technology that you need available to get into those cities. Now you always need to have the bulb at that level. So everything starts at level 1. So if we wanted to get into, let's see, the Washington DC here at level 3, I'd need level 3 bulb, and then I would need level 3 in either AC or DC there to get into there. So you want to always move up bulb and then pick and choose, or maybe even move up both, the AC and DC systems there. Now here we've got the money in the game, and players will start off with $14,000, and money can be hidden because it's all got this back on it here. And this is not paper money. It's actually relatively thick cardboard there, and so it's very easy to handle, doesn't stick together or anything, so it's very nice. It looks like little treasury notes based on the gold backing the dollar at this particular time. So you're going to get $14,000 to start, and then players will choose one of the 5 investors to sort of partner with in the game. And so you've got Thomas Edison here, of course you've got Nikola Tesla as well, and there's a bunch of different other inventors. They each have a special ability that they get, and they also have some stats. So you've got these 4 different stats that they can have, and you can see they're very much different, and some of them don't have any money backing. Sort of Nikola Tesla is sort of thematic to the history of it, and whereas Edison had a little bit of money backing. And there will be other luminaries and things you can get that also have these statistics as well. And the other thing to note is you're going to get preferred shares of the investor that you choose. So if you chose Tesla here, he's kind of got his own stock in his own company, so you would get those preferred shares. Now what these are is these count as 4 normal shares for the stock. So the rest of these stocks will be laid out, 4 of these will be laid out in sort of a general market for each company that's in the game. And so if we were playing 3 players, we'd have 4 Edison, 4 Tesla, in this case 4 Thomson, all put into a general pool that players can buy and sell from. And then 2 stocks from each company are going to be set aside. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but let's talk about actually how you win the game now. So that's to make a little bit more sense as I explain this. So as I said, the game is going to take place over 6 rounds, and the winner is going to be the one that has the most worth in stocks. And remember, of course, that the preferred stocks actually count as having 4. And you get these and you don't get rid of these for the remainder of the game. So you've already got 4 stocks invested in your own company. So if Edison's stock here was at 57, and I'd have 4 of these, and maybe I bought 2 more, I'd have 6 times 57, but I might also have stock in Tesla or something like that, or somebody else's. So then I would take Tesla, let's say Tesla didn't get that high, he had 50, so I'd add 50 times 6 times 57, and then I would have that. So you take the stock worth, and then that is the winner of the game. Any money you have left over is actually a tiebreaker. So it's not personal money that is the winner, it's what you have invested in the stocks. So how does a game work? Well, you're going to have, like I said, these 3 auction phases, and these phase numbers are actually going to dictate some other things during the round. But in between these, you're going to have 2 sets of action phases, and there'll be a variable number of actions that players can take. So let's talk about how these different auction phases actually work. Well, during each of these phases, you're actually going to set aside cards from these 2 different decks. Now you've got propaganda cards, and I'll talk about those in a minute, but you'll set these up, you'll know what these are going into each phase, but these won't be used until we get into the action round. Now the one thing that you're going to do auctions for are these luminaries here, and you're going to set out a different amount of these based on the player count, and you're going to auction these. So you're going to see these actually come out in different phases, so phase 1, phase 2, and then so on. And what these guys do here is they actually have these different stats. Now, not only do they have the different stats, but they give you basically an action. So you get 1 action to start the game based on your primary investor, in this case Edison, and then as you maybe get a JP Morgan to come help you out, he's going to give you an action, because all the actions in the game require you to tap or turn over a character card, and then that you can do an action with that. And sometimes you can use more than 1. So that's going to dictate the amount of actions also that you have, and the actions that you get during the game is going to increase as you acquire more and more of these different characters. So you go ahead and do an auction for that, and it's a very simple auction. You kind of put up a bid. The minimum bid is $1,000, and then you keep going around the table. Once you pass, you're out, and then once you win a luminary or a character, then you're out. You only get the 1 per each of the phases. In the second phase of the auction, remember how I told you set aside some of these stock cards here. You take 2 from each company, and then you shuffle them up, and then you're going to deal out new luminaries, and you're going to put these stock cards underneath them. So you're going to get a free stock with them in phase 2, and then again in phase 3. Now once you've done your auction, then you're going to have 4 possible actions that you can do on your turn. And as I said before, you've got to exhaust one of your characters or more characters depending on the action to do whatever you want to do. And you're also going to be considering now these different stats that are on the characters in sort of augmenting the action that you're taking. So the personalities in this case are very important to your goals. There's a real character to plot or character to mechanic kind of thing happening here. So the first auction I've talked about a little bit, and that's getting your contracts out into here. So the first thing to note is you're not going to have any markers on the board to start, so you're going to want to try to get into one of these level 1 spots. And everybody can get into that because you have the technology to get in. Everybody starts with level 1 in each of the technologies. You don't necessarily have to start at level 1. You could develop your technology first and then jump into level 2 or 3 if you really could do that. But then as you expand, you might have to pay a penalty. So let's say I was starting here in Menlo Park. If I was going straight to Newark, I wouldn't have to pay any kind of penalty because it's adjacent to where I'm going. But let's say I wanted to jump over here to New York City. I have to pay $1,000 per city that I had to skip through to get to that. And it's not only $1,000 per city, it's $1,000 per phase that I'm in. So remember, there's 3 phases. So you take the 1,000, multiply it by the number of cities you're skipping, and then times the phase. So in this case, it would cost me 1,000 to start the game. If we were in the second phase, it would only cost me 2. Now the other cost to keep in mind when you go into these cities, you can see these different symbols here. So you got like a small town, a medium city, and then a larger metropolis there. So this is the cost in red that you can see. So this Columbus here is a smaller sort of town. It's going to cost you $4,000 to get into there, whereas Pittsburgh's a little bit bigger. It's going to cost you $8,000, and then New York City, which we were looking at before, is going to cost you $12,000. Now the thing to keep in mind is the character that you activated to do the action, because remember, you've got to exhaust a character to take an action. So to do this action, we're actually going to look at the money value here. And again, Nikola Tesla starts with no kind of money bonus, but let's say the Tesla character or player had bought JP Morgan, got him an auction, he could exhaust him. He's going to get a discount of $2 again, or excuse me, $2,000 times the phase that we're in. So in the first phase, the first 2 rounds, we're going to get a subtraction of $2,000. In the second and third phase, that will go up. If we were trying to get into Columbus here, it would cost us $4,000 minus 2 if we used a JP Morgan character to do the action. So it only cost us $2,000 plus if we had any adjacency, if we skipped any towns or anything. Now again, I talked about this before, you also need to have the ability to get in there. So if we're getting this level 2 spot, and we're the Tesla character here, the blue player, then we'd need level 2, definitely in bulb. You've always got to have the correct lever in bulb, and then either level 2 in AC or DC. Let's say we did DC there, and so then now we could do that. But let's say another player had gotten the patent in that. So if they had marked it here, let's say Edison had gotten the patent there, then you would have to pay. I'll talk about how you actually get the patent in a second, but then you've got to pay sort of the patent fee to that player if you're using that type of technology to get into the city when you get the project. Now the final thing that you're going to do is actually bump your stock up by the amount shown based on the size of the city. So again, if we went into Columbus here, we'd bump our stock up +4, or Pittsburgh here would be +5. Now this is going to be mitigated by the fame track for the type of technology that we used. So if we jump down here, we're using the DC technology in this case. So if we look where this marker is on this track, and I'll talk about how to move that in just a second, you're going to get plus or minus whatever the value was of the stock. So again, if we went into Columbus, it was +4. If the marker was down here, we'd actually get +6, whereas if it was way up here, then we'd only get +2. Now, again, the main requirement is the technology level. So how do we increase technology? Well, if you can see here, all of these technologies have a little lightning bolt and a little gear symbol. And this is the requirement to bump up to that particular level. So using our example before of Tesla and JP Morgan is pretty worthless and Tesla is pretty special. So Tesla also has another thing. Tesla's company ignores the lightning bolt requirement when advancing technology unless he was previously exhausted on this turn. So you can spend Tesla now and you say, let's just look at the stats for now. So he's got 3 lightning bolt and 1 gear, and so he can jump up, you know, maybe a couple of spots here. So you could have him move 1, 2 right away because he's got his 3 lightning bolt, and then he doesn't have enough to do the second gear. But if you had another character, let's say we had this Edwin Rice character here, he would give us the 2 gears, and so he could make that jump. So you can jump multiple in a particular track, and you always increase just 1 track at a time there. And so in this case, you might exhaust more than 1 character to do the bump in technology. Now the other thing to do is, if we take a look and notice our money symbol here, if our money, the amount of money that we spent from both of the characters is equal to the number of spaces we jumped, in this case we'd need 2, then we'd be able to mark this with a patent. So you can have a patent in each of these different levels here. You can get patents, so when people go into those different level cities again, so if somebody uses a level 3 to get into there, then they've got to pay you the patent. So that's how you advance the technology. Advance 1 or more characters, you can jump up a few spots and then claim the patent if you so wish. So the next thing you can do is engage in propaganda, and you have 2 options. One, you can adjust the company fame or sort of the AC/DC technology fame. So the way you do is you exhaust the character again, and then you're going to look at their propaganda thing, this sort of bullhorn here at the bottom. So Mr. Coffin here has a ability of 1. So if I wanted to use it for my company here, I can actually move this up and move it up one spot, and you can move it up more if you had more. And then what this is doing, this is sort of going to reset or show you what the turnover is going to look like at the end of the round, and then this is sort of the present, and this will realign once we resolve the end of the round. And you get a little bonus for being at the top too. So you can adjust your personal company fame, or you can adjust this marker here and move this up or down equal to the value then of that player's character's propaganda. Now, regardless if you chose company or the AC/DC track, you get to choose a propaganda card whenever you adjust propaganda. Now, remember I said these propaganda cards will come out during the different phases. If they don't get used, they get discarded at the beginning of the next phase, but you can see they have some different abilities here. So once you do whatever you did, your turn order or the AC/DC, you can choose any of these, and then you get to move whatever the indicated marker is more spaces. So pretend I did turn order, then I could choose this and then move the AC/DC track up or down one. And then here I could do maybe some more spaces on the company fame track. And then you're going to get some money here. So this, you're going to get this $2,000 in addition to the value of the luminaries money here. So again, maybe we used Coffin here. We moved the marker up once, and then we're going to get Sarah Bernhardt here. We're going to get an extra $2,000 plus $1,000 times the phase again. So you want to be very careful about making sure that you do it at the right time, because not everything is multiplied by the phase, but a lot of times things are. So you're going to get $1,000 times the phase plus whatever the money is on whatever the propaganda card is that you chose. Now, the last thing that you can do is you can go to the stock market and visit the stock market. And here you can buy and sell stock as many times as you want, really. And again, like I said, you're going to have some stock certificates. There's going to be 4 of each company that are set aside into a pool somewhere off to the side of the board. And then I can go ahead and buy shares in any company that I want. Now, you can never have more than 4 shares in an opponent's company. So if I was Edison, I can't have more than 4 Tesla shares. And the cost is going to actually be, of course, where it currently is on the market here. So if I was buying Thompson's here at 28 bucks a share, $28,000, then I would go ahead and pay that. Now, you can't buy and sell the same share, of course, but I could have wanted to sell a Coffin and buy a Tesla or so on. Now, when you buy stock in a company, you're going to advance the marker 1 point on the stock track per phase. So for phase 3 would go 1, 2, 3 over to here. And I should say you also get a discount here based on the luminaries dollar value if they have that. Again, times whatever phase we happen to be in. Now, if you sell a piece of stock, you get a bonus instead of a discount. So you would get this number times that in addition to whatever you sell it for. Now you're going to sell it here for this amount. So let's say I was selling that Tesla stock for 50 bucks. But when you sell a stock, very interestingly, you actually move this 1 spot directly to the left there. So you can kind of take somebody else's stock. And that's the 4 actions that you can do. So then at the end of each round here, each action round, then you're going to have a kind of a bookkeeping phase. You readjust turn order as we had. So maybe this guy had moved up really far there. So we'd go ahead and move him up to there. And so you can jump extra spaces as well there. And then whoever is at the highest here, their company is actually going to jump and get 1 little bonus there for having the most famous company. And then you're going to take a look at the patents. Remember I talked about the different patents. And depending on where this marker is, so if we had this up here in sort of the yellow zone, then whoever had the company that had the highest patent in that particular thing, they would also get a little bit of a bonus there. And then each company is going to take their profit. So that's going to depend on where their column is at. And so sometimes a buck can make a difference. So if you're here and you get that extra $1, that's going to give you an extra $2,000 of profit for that company. Or in some cases it goes up 4, or then up 2, and then up 4. So sometimes that can make a little bit of difference in the payout. So everybody's going to get paid out in their company's stock and whatever their payout's supposed to be. And then anybody who has exhausted a luminary is going to sort of untap all of their different luminaries. And then we just play 6 rounds. And again, you have different auctions at these different phase points. And whoever has the most valuable portfolio of stock, tie broken by personal money, is going to be the winner. Okay, so that was Tesla versus Edison. What do I think of the game? I really enjoy this game quite a bit. So let me go over the different things that I really enjoy about it and that kind of surprised me a little bit about the game. The first thing is it actually works really well as a 2-player game, which really surprises me because it's a stock game and, you know, it doesn't really seem like it would work for 2 players. It's got some different routing and networking things, kind of a la Power Grid as you're sort of grabbing contracts and trying to get in there. And again, it's got an auction thing, which doesn't always work great with 2 players, and it's got a stock market thing. but it really actually does work pretty well with a two-player scenario. Now, I think it works better with more players, and that's for sure, because the one thing that you kind of miss out on is sort of forming sort of unnatural or uncomfortable alliances with other players, as some people try to go AC and other players kind of go DC. Now, with two players, you don't really have that. You don't really have that manipulation. You can just kind of both piggyback off each other or just go both separate ways, and you can play around with the propaganda. So it's cool. It works perfectly fine. And I always feel like I'm bashing on two-player when I say this, but I'm not. It just, you kind of unlock that extra level of gameplay when you add more players, and a little bit more dynamic with that propaganda track and, you know, the different types of power and stuff. So, but it works really well with two players, and it's really surprising at the end of the day. The other cool thing about it is I really like the propaganda part of the game. It's actually very simple, but I'm very glad that they added the propaganda cards, because that adds you kind of this that extra little bonus, as opposed to like just moving something on the track. It just gives you that little bonus to do sort of a little tiny combo, give you a little bit of cash so you can get into some more stock and things. And that's really the key of the game. Something I really enjoy about the game is you've got these other different mechanics and different using different characters and their different special abilities, and they get better and better and better as the game goes on. But at the beginning of the game, or beginning of the day, it's really about screwing your opponents over and taking their company in a lot of ways and driving it down. Because at the end of the game, it doesn't matter. If you don't have any money, who cares? You want the best stock portfolio, and you, more importantly, you want your opponents to have the worst stock portfolio. So that's a very interesting, just how that works, and very, very brutal that it can be. So if you are sort of scared of this, it's not really a family game, I don't think, but if you don't have a group that's going to be too into like directly screwing somebody over, then this is probably one to stay away from. But I like that cutthroatness of it, and it really kind of fits the theme of the game as well. And that's one thing that's very cool about the game, is it's very strange, because you think of a game like Tesla versus Edison, when you see the title, you're like, okay, what is this game going to be about? You know, it's okay, they were both, you know, very talented inventors, and, you know, especially with Tesla now, we're kind of unlocking how smart he really was and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, how can you make a game about that? But it's from the vantage point of an investor partnering with these inventors, and I really like that, and it still holds true today, I think. And just a little insight, I don't know if this will be very important to people, but I actually work in the sort of the smart grid industry, and we see this still a lot today. Now, people aren't necessarily inventing, well, they are to some degree, but not as dramatically inventing new technologies as they were back then, but that's still happening. People are still trying to, you know, roll out new and different ways to communicate consumption of gas and water and electricity and all that stuff, and people are patenting those technologies. That's very important in this world, and you're trying to get in and you know, lock down these different big cities and deploy these big you know, I'm trying to not get too technical, but you got different meters, and the way that meter readers work, and, you know, the way that they work nowadays is much different than they used to work even 10 years ago. And, you know, if you have people driving down the street and, you know, picking that up, or maybe the meters are talking to each other and all kinds of stuff like that. So this game really still mirrors that. You could definitely repaste this on and call it Smart Grid instead of Power Grid or something. And just kind of retheme it for the modern era, and I think it would really work. And so it really, I think, hits home for me in terms of how the theme, I can kind of imagine these people trying to get in, and just the beginnings of the grid, you know, that we have in this country, which is now like 80 years old. But this is the beginnings of it, and at the time of this is very new, exciting technology for everybody. Some of the propaganda cards and things, there's little thematic sort of hooks and stuff on the different characters and all that stuff. So very solid, cutthroat, nasty sort of company versus company kind of game, but still eliciting a lot of the flavor of the times and sort of the spirit of invention in a way, but not in the way that you normally think. And I think a more realistic way. And a lot of this, I think, you know, my little short story there about my bias is, it's not about the technology anytime. Like, anybody can do like a little science experiment a lot of times. And you know what? Good for you. That's not really going to do anything, though, and they're going to impact anybody unless you have, unfortunately, some kind of entity, corporate, government, or whatever, backing you to spread that technology across the earth. That's a very important thing about this game, is it gives you that feel of that. So you're advancing technology, you feel good about it, you know, you're moving up tracks, you can kind of see your cubes spread across the board, you got money and then you get stock, and so it's a good balance between kind of the different worlds of that. And so I think it's an excellent game, and I think a lot of people are going to like, if you're sort of an 18xx or a train games type of player, you might go into it for the stock aspect of the game. And if you're more of like a Euro type of player, you can get into sort of the action management and all that kind of good stuff, and you know, which characters to use. Do I really spend 2 to jump up and get that patent? That's going to unlock the level 3 for me, so I can get into those bigger cities, and there's a little bit of more economic money management and things like that. So there's a lot of different aspects to the game to get sort of the 18xx versus the Euro sort of thing. But the good theme and everything comes out. It's a very tough game and very brutal and everything like that. And I think for me it has a little bit of a sweet spot because the theme really resonates with me. So anyway, definitely take a look at it and give this one a shot for sure. So thanks.